Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Hello, party people. How are we all doing today? I'm excited to be here with you again this week for another episode of the podcast. If you are watching the video recording, you will see that I have completely put in no effort into my appearance today. I am wearing the exact outfit that I wore to the gym this morning and a Waldorf School Spartans hat because it's a really cold, blustery, snowy day outside here in Denver, and I just decided to be cozy and just I'm maybe my flattering myself by saying that the fact that I put no effort in means that I'm just choosing not to be vain today. There you go. I'm so humble that I just don't even care what I look like. Thank goodness for fake eyelashes. Makes me look sort of presentable even when I really don't. But what I want to talk about today is not the weather and it's not my appearance. It is something that I'm kind of surprised I've made it this far without talking about on the podcast. It's something I know that people are very curious about. I get questions about weekly, and that is screen time, technology, phones, that kind of stuff. And so we are going to talk about that today. And in fact, I just like a week ago had a client ask me to just send them a picture of my screen time policy. And so I had to like kind of dig up this picture that was from like back in the day because my kids are old now. And I dug that screen time policy up and I was like, damn, this was really good policy. Like it really did us proud for many, many, many years. And if you are on my email list, the email that went out this week for this podcast has a picture of that screen time policy. And if you're not on my email list, you need to reach out to me and ask to be put on my email list, and then I will send you personally a picture of that screen time policy. So that's a little teaser. I'm not going to tell you what's on the policy. But my confession for you this week is that I don't follow that policy anymore. And partly that's because my kids are older. You know, when we started that policy, my oldest kid was maybe 9 and my youngest was a newborn baby. So we had kids, you know, toddlers and young school aged kids. And now my oldest is 20, my youngest is 10. It's a different story. But if I'm honest, there's a whole nother reason why we don't use that screen time policy anymore. And it is because during COVID, I broke my screen time policy that said no weekday screen time. And we started instituting afternoon screen time during the week. And my youngest kiddo has been raised in this environment of weekday screen time, and I have not undertaken the action needed to back us into no more weekday screen time yet. And maybe I never will. Who knows? We'll find out. But that's my confession for you this week. I am a mere mortal when it comes to screens and technology, just like all y'all. Um, But what I want to talk about in terms of policies and our sort of like mindset or approach to technology and screens, I think is a pretty novel approach. I haven't really heard anybody else talking about things this way, but to me, it seems really clear. And that is to think about screens and technology and phones and video games and all of those things as just foods that you're introducing to your child. So think back, if you have older kids, it might take a minute to go on a little trip down memory lane to when you were just introducing solid foods to your precious little baby. And what do they tell you? Like, introduce this food and just kind of see how your kiddo does with it. Don't give everything at once. Like, don't do avocado and squash and apples and strawberries and sweet potatoes all in the same day, because if they have a reaction, we have no idea where it came from. Just kind of go slow and steady, be observant. And if your kiddo shows a negative reaction to something, now you know, and you won't give it to them anymore. I wish to God that this is the attitude we had toward technology, because children show us all the time that they are allergic to technology, all the time. And I'm going to talk a little bit about like the signs that we know. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, I guess this, this just isn't good alchemy with my kid's body, or, my kid just doesn't respond well, or, this thing that I've introduced into their lives doesn't agree with them, we tie ourselves in knots trying to figure out a way to give our kids this thing that they're allergic to. And I really want you to think about how insane that is. If your child was allergic to peanuts, you just wouldn't give them peanuts. And you would understand that if you continuously gave them peanuts, like you were poisoning them and you were hurting them, and you could actually kill them by giving them peanuts. Nowhere do we try to tie ourselves in knots and just figure out, like, well, maybe if they're only allowed to have this many peanuts a day, it will be okay. Or, well, maybe if they only have peanuts after they've like done some really great stuff and eaten vegetables, then it's okay. Or, maybe it's okay for them to just have this one, like a Spanish peanut. No, we don't do that. We just don't give them peanuts. We literally attune to what our child is presenting to us. Our child shows us, this is who I am in relation to peanuts. And then we say, okay, thank you for telling me that, child. I will respond accordingly. Please open your mind up to the concept that you might be able to do that around technology. And let's give a few like concrete examples. So I'm not just doing this whole like analogy the whole time. So some kids, for example, are totally fine to watch TV. But when they play video games, it makes them so aggressive and so dysregulated that it's, really, really, really hard to manage their behavior after they've played video games. Some kids do great with video games because it's super interactive, but when they're watching TV, they are almost become like zombified. And when it's time to turn the TV off, their nervous system is so dysregulated that once again, it's really hard to manage their behavior. Some kids are totally fine with screen time like that, but they do very, very poorly when given a phone. So, what if we were just looking at that, and instead of doing the two things that I see most common, which is somebody tell me an arbitrary age when I can give my kid a phone. And usually the number is 12 because finally, at least we're getting some sort of pediatric guidance on phones. And they always say try to wait until they're 12 at least. Okay, 12. So that's an arbitrary number, not based on who your kid is or how your family works or what your kid's needs are or how they respond to technology at all. It's just a number. So that's one thing that we like to do. Or we give our kids access to technology, and whatever age it is when we've given them that access, they clearly can't handle it at all. And instead of saying, oops, mistake, this doesn't agree with you, we download all these screen time apps and we monitor their phone use and we check their hours, and we have these like, the Bark app on our phone or whatever app on our phone to manage and monitor our kids' screen time usage and what they're doing with their phone and who they're messaging and how they're messaging and blah, 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 all of those things. I really want to offer you that. First of all, I've heard from so many parents something that's completely not true, which is, oh, you can't, once you've opened that Pandora's box, you can't undo it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. That's not true at all. You literally can just go into your kid's room or into their backpack or into their hands and gently pick up the phone and take it away. You can totally do that. And it's the same thing with getting them an Xbox or whatever. It is absolutely possible for you to say, oh, well, we gave it a try and it wasn't working out. So we'll try it again another time. But right now, we know in our family this isn't really working. And we just put it up in the attic, give it to Goodwill, sell it at a garage sale, like whatever, and try it again later. And I really want to impress upon you that this attitude I'm describing isn't just how you outwardly would present this to your child. It's also how I hope you can inwardly think about it. Your kid's not bad or naughty. Your kid isn't, needing all of this crazy discipline and to be taught a lesson. That's not why we're doing any of this stuff. It's just a true fact. Like, wow, I have given you access to something that is above your pay grade. And I acknowledge that. And, my bad. And we will try it again later. When you're older and you're more ready, we'll try it again and we'll see. And maybe you'll be ready for it and maybe you won't. And we'll find out. It's all an experiment. whatever the results of that experiment are, they're not good, they're not bad, they're not wrong, they're not right. They don't mean anything about us as parents, and they don't mean anything about our kids as kids. It just means that, oh, okay, so now we know, right? The same as we would think about allergies, right? If our kid's allergic to peanuts, we're not like, you naughty little shit. I have to discipline you about this. How dare you get a rash? No, of course not. They're just allergic to peanuts. Like, well, that sucks. Now we know, right? So let's really think about screens and technology that way. If you're in a situation where you are constantly fighting about screens with your kids, if you're in a situation where your kid is completely off the rails with their like emotional regulation and their, sort of behavior, that's a really good sign that your kid is probably getting exposed to too much screen time and it's just too much for them. They just can't handle it. If you notice a pattern where it's like, okay, every single time I turn the TV off, it's like, everybody falls apart. Okay, well, that's really good information. Let's start looking at our children's behavior around screens and as a result of screens. It's just really important information that we've been ignoring this whole time. And we need to actually start attuning to our kids. Remember, you guys hear me talk about practically every week. Authoritative parenting means we both attune to our children and we have boundaries and discipline. Okay, well, if your kid's showing you over and over and over again that screens are just like absolutely not good for them, and you're not acknowledging that and honoring that, you're not attuning to your kid. And so looking at this stuff through the lens of like, it's an experiment. We'll find out. There's no wrong or right answer, and there's no wrong or right age. There's no wrong or right, you know, exposure level or something like that. Instead of having these arbitrary, like, okay, 12 years old, also 3 hours a day, also, this or that, in the morning or not in the afternoon or before this or before that or after that gets done or whatever. Those are all little details that you get to decide for yourself. There's no wrong or right answer there. Your child is going to give you the answers. Your child's ability to handle this new aspect to their life is what's going to give you the answers on that. And I'm telling you, I have a couple of clients who have kids who, video games are a huge part of their life, and it's so hard to take it away. I completely get it. A lot of times when I'm teaching stuff, I really try to make it super simple and straightforward. That doesn't mean that I think that what I'm teaching you is easy to do. It's not easy, but it is simple. Like, if video games make your kid a wild, violent monster, like, I mean, come on now. This isn't rocket science. Stop letting them play video games. Right? And the same thing with phones. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the phone um, evolution in my family, just so you can see that I do put my money where my mouth is, even though I've broken my own screen time policy after COVID. Um, so when my older boys, when we were living in Spain at the time, and they had both just gone through an extremely hard school year, and Mike and I really wanted to reward them and show them how much we just were proud of them, and that they really got something good and exciting out of like all this hard work that they had done. We decided to get them phones. And at that time, my oldest kiddo was just finishing eighth grade. So he was actually 13 or 14. And my youngest was just finishing sixth grade. So he was 12. So, I mean, by American standards, we made it a really long time before they got phones. And we gave them phones. We put some screen time limits on them. They would turn off after X number of hours or whatever. And I did not at that time have this like, well, we'll just see how this goes kind of policy around it, and which I should have. I cultivated later, but my oldest kid who was starting his freshman year of high school, like definitely when you would think your kid would have a phone, he absolutely could not handle having his phone. He was enraged that there were even any screen time limits on it at all. So we spent way too much time like arguing about whether or not he should have limits on his phone. He was doing things with his phone that were not okay, and they were disrespectful to us. They were disrespectful to the people he was communicating with. They were against the rules of our house. all of those kinds of things. We also have a rule in our house that technology gets turned in at bedtime. So, and turned in means like to a docking station that's right next to our bed. So, um, he was having a really hard time with that. All of these things, like all signs pointed to this kid isn't ready for this. Like, I'm spending way too much time fighting about this with you. If it's a bone of contention, we're not ready for this. I'm making bad decisions with the technology. I'm not following the rules with the technology, et cetera, et cetera. And eventually he really did lose his phone. But what I should have done is have the attitude right from the very beginning of like, oh, you know what? Not time. We'll try it again in a month and let's just see what happens. Or we'll try it again in a couple of months. But like, now we know. Lesson learned, was a little too soon, blah, 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 blah. I did not do that. It took me way too long to realize like, oh my gosh, like you cannot have this phone. I've given you the like pathway to your own destruction and I'm going to take that away right now. My second kid who was younger, right? He's 12. He's only 12. He did fine with his phone. We followed the rules. He turned it in. Whenever we would look at it just to double check, everything was like on the up and up. He's really had a lot of self-control with his phone and that was great. And so that worked out fine. Third kid comes along and she's like, well, you gave River a phone when he was 12, so you should give me a phone when I'm 12. But we had some already before phone age, we'd had some experience where, some bad decisions had been made with an iPad and with one of our old phones that didn't have a SIM card in it and, that kind of stuff. And so we both were just like, yeah, no, we haven't seen signs that you're ready for that yet. And so she got her phone much later. And and that's just how it's gone. And I still have a fourth kid. We'll see. We'll see what age he is when he gets his phone. But do you see how, like, especially now that I've been, schooling myself a little bit about the screens, right? Like I learned my lesson with my oldest kiddo and have a way better approach now. But do you see how there's no set rule? It's not everybody in this family gets their phone when they're 12, or, everyone in this family gets this number of hours, or everyone in this family gets these kind of parental controls. Like, no, this is just like everything else that you've learned from me, whether you're working with me or you're listening to the podcast or whatever, it's relationship based. It's I see you, child of mine. I see you, the individual. And here's what I can tell is the right thing for you. And it's totally cool if you think it's unfair or you think you're owed something different. Like, you don't have to like what I'm saying. This is just what feels right to me. And it might not be the same thing as what felt right with one of your siblings. I'm really not interested in that. It's fine. And that's how that worked. That older son who got his phone taken away in freshman year did not get it back until he was a junior because he had a long row to hoe and a lot of other things before he was really ready to handle something like that. I mean, I don't know any parenting professional out there who would just say in general, like, don't give your kids a phone until they're juniors in high school. But that's what this particular child needed. And I don't know any parenting professional out there who would say, definitely give your kid a phone when they're younger than 12 years old. But there are kids out there for whom it makes sense and it works and and it's appropriate for that child's maturity and capacity and skill set. It's for you as the parent to decide, and as long as you are actually responding to the results of your experiment, there's no wrong answer. And sometimes that's frustrating because it would be really great if we just had like this cool policy. But it's what's best for us in our families. It's what's best for our kids. And, this is kind of the hallmark or the cornerstone of working with somebody like me. Instead of reading in a book something generic and needing to figure out how to contort and apply that to your family, or reading something online or whatever, you get to work with somebody who helps you actually take in the information that your children are giving you and make a choice that works best for you guys. It's custom, it's personalized. We talk about the things that get in the way, like what was going on with me that I didn't take that phone away from my oldest son sooner. I had to do that work for myself to figure out, like, what am I trying to avoid? Why am I so reticent to just take this thing away? All of those things. Like, that's kind of what happens when you work with a coach, whether we're talking about screens or anything else. Learning how to, because you're working with somebody who helps you, really examine what is going on with me. Why is this so hard for me? How come I'm showing up in this way that's not actually in integrity with what I want to be showing? These questions are very, very important, because if we're not doing our own work, we're incapable of showing up in this like, hey, you know what? It's an experiment. We'll find out. No harm, no foul. Looks like we jumped the gun. We'll try it again later. Like, that attitude is really easy for me to say into a microphone when no children are around me. It's not easy for most of us to actually present that way to our kids if we're not doing our own sort of curiosity, digging, peeling back the layers work. And that's what happens when you work with me. We're going to be doing everything that you hear me present in this podcast, or if you're reading my emails or my blog posts. You'll see everything that I talk about always has two layers to it. It has the layer of the what do we actually do? Here's the skill set, here's the boots on the ground approach. And it also has that aspect of what's going on internally for me? What is my personal growth work that needs to happen in order for me to implement this thing? Those two pieces of the puzzle are really, really hard to do by yourself. They are very hard to come up with on your own. Doing your own work is no joke. And then actually following through and being the person that you talk to me about when we're in session, when you're with your kids, no joke. It is hard. So if you know that you want to do this stuff, if the way that I describe, how I've navigated things with my family, or these ideas about parenting to you, if that's really vibing for you, but you know that you need some help to get from here to there, you are so normal, and you need to be setting up that free discovery call that you hear me talk about every week. Set it up. Come and talk to me about exactly what's going on in your family now, what you want it to be, and let's together create a roadmap for you to get from here to there. That's what those discovery calls are all about. If it feels like you want me to be in your corner while you actually follow that roadmap, that's awesome too. And either way, you're going to leave your call knowing so much more than you did when you started, having so much clarity, so much more clarity than you did when you came to the call, and having just a path forward. It's hugely beneficial. I hope you're having a great week. I'm excited to talk to you again next week. And yeah, if you're in Denver, stay warm. Bye, everybody.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long, or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.